Hi folks, my name's Jem, I'm the Crazy Pigeon Lady, and it's my mission to entertain, educate and inspire you with all things pigeon and dove. Welcome back to this, my Pigeocation series, and in this episode, my Pigeocation is all about Cher Ami, and I'm producing this video in honour of Pigeon Day, the 13th of June, which honours the death of Cher Ami, who died on the 13th of June 1919. Now, Cher Ami was a World War I messenger pigeon whose name, Cher Ami, means dear friend in French. The bird was an English-bred bird with the ring number beginning NURP, NURP 18, which stood for the National Union of Racing Pigeons, which was the body that governed racing pigeons at the time in England, and 18 meaning the year 1918, when the bird hatched. Cher Ami was donated to the US Army Signal Corps by a British pigeon fancier for use during World War I as a messenger bird, and was famous for delivering the message that saved the US Army's lost battalion, which got stuck during the Meuse-Argonne offensive in France in 1918. To give you a little bit of background about the use of World War I messenger pigeons for a moment before we move on to Cher Ami. At the time, there weren't reliable ways of transporting messages and making communications around the battlefield. Radio was fairly in its infancy and operated at quite short range, and whilst they laid telephone cables, they often became damaged during shell fire and couldn't cover long distances. Soldiers, people who would act as runners or messengers, would sometimes be injured or captured or even killed, and so pigeons were actually the most reliable way in order to convey a message in pretty short time from a place in the battlefield in an environment that was complex and continually changing. Messenger pigeons in World War I were used by all the services, by the Army, the Navy and the Air Force. And on the battlefield they were transported around in mobile lofts of various types of vehicles, including things like horse-drawn buses. Now, the pigeons were looked after by what were called Pigeoneers, who were soldiers, usually from the Signals Corps of the Army, who were responsible for communications. And in life they probably would have been pigeon fanciers, and they would have been given this role as a result of their expertise and experience with pigeons. In World War I, many British pigeon fanciers donated their racing pigeons to the British Army for use in the offensive, and also when the US Army came over and joined the war in 1918, they donated birds to them too. And this was how Cher Ami became involved in the conflict. So on to the Lost Battalion then. So the Lost Battalion was a mixed unit of American soldiers commanded by Major Charles Whittlesey, and they advanced as part of a major offensive in the Meuse-Argonne region in France in the autumn of 1918. And they advanced perhaps a little further than their commanders anticipated that they might have done, and became cut off from the rest of the forces, and stuck in a ravine with very few rations, water or ammunition, and under continual fire from the enemy. And after a while they came under friendly fire from their own US artillery, and that caused a number of casualties and indeed deaths of some of the soldiers in the Lost Battalion. There was no radio or telephone for them to communicate with their own forces to try to get the friendly fire to stop, and any runners that they sent were likely captured or killed. So all they had left to try to communicate their predicament and to stop the bombardment were the pigeons. Which brings me on to Cher Ami. Now, Cher Ami was not the first pigeon that was dispatched by the Lost Battalion. In fact, Cher Ami was the third pigeon, the first one having been shot almost immediately after being released. The second panicked and escaped from its basket after a shell exploded nearby, leaving Cher Ami as their last hope for getting a message back to headquarters. They wrote a message, or should I say Major Charles Whittlesey wrote the message, which said, "We are on the road, parallel to 276.4, one assumes a coordinate. Our artillery is dropping a barrage directly on us. For heaven's sake, stop it." And of course their situation was quite desperate at this point. Now, Cher Ami was released got hit by a bullet and dropped to the ground, but managed to get up again and fly up and spent a little time in a tree, perhaps recuperating from the shock of having been shot, before then flying back to headquarters, which Cher Ami did in some 25 minutes, which was an incredible feat considering that Cher Ami's eye as well as leg were severely damaged in the fire that the bird undertook whilst trying to get this message back home. The barrage stopped shortly after. The pigeon made it back, but sadly Cher Ami had lost an eye and lost a leg in the process. Cher Ami recuperated and was eventually sent back to the United States and was used as a recruitment mascot and was decorated as a war hero, receiving the Croix de Guerre, the Cross of War, which is a French decoration. But sadly, eventually those injuries got the better of Cher Ami, who died in June 1919 and was barely 2 years old. There are a lot of myths and legends that surround the story of Cher Ami, and you need to understand the context of World War I at the time. It was a major war that had created a huge amount of loss of life and devastation of those areas in which it took place. So it was very important for the war to be viewed positively by the public, by the political leaders and the military leaders of the time, so that there could be a justification that this loss had contributed to something important and that it had been a necessary sacrifice. And so, certainly through the media and things like that, it was important to have heroic stories of tremendous endeavour to lift the spirits of the public and get them behind the war. And the story of the Lost Battalion and Cher Ami the pigeon was part of this whole thing of heroic stories. There are some questions about some of the facts. For example, whether or not Cher Ami really was the pigeon that brought the message that saved the Lost Battalion, or was it another pigeon, some other nameless pigeon that we're not aware of? Cher Ami may not even been the cause of the stopping of the bombardment. There is a suggestion that the US artillery realised their mistake, that they were targeting the wrong area even before Cher Ami arrived back with her message. And, having just said her, the question of Cher Ami's gender, which has been something that's been a topic of debate as a part of this story. Cher Ami was described as being a he, and indeed recorded in some US Army signals records as being a male. However, there is also a suggestion that when Cher Ami's body was processed for taxidermy to stuff her body for presentation in the Smithsonian Museum in the USA, which is where Cher Ami now resides, that the taxidermist had reported that the bird was female. However, we now know, as a result of DNA analysis that was performed by the Smithsonian Museum in 2021, that we have conclusive proof of Cher Ami's gender, and Cher Ami is indeed a male bird. So in summary, whatever the precise facts concerning Cher Ami's story, Cher Ami was a real pigeon, and Cher Ami and other war pigeons like it performed incredible heroic feats of determination, flying back to their loft under very dangerous circumstances and sometimes even injured and almost certainly afraid while they were doing so. And that is to be respected and honoured, whatever the truth of Cher Ami's specific story. And it is also true to say that the actions of messenger pigeons really did save human lives. And for that, of course, we are very thankful. And that is why we celebrate Pigeon Day on the 13th of June in honour of Cher Ami and all the other pigeons in all wars that have helped save human lives. Thank you very much for listening. I hope that's been of interest. Please like, share, subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell so that you can be the next to hear about my next Crazy Pigeon Lady video. Thanks for watching and see you soon. Goodbye.